Hey, my fellow listeners. We know you guys love these creepy stories, yet most of you aren't subscribing. Please hit that sub button and join the family. Hit the bell icon so you never miss another video. You'll also be supporting me. Thank you. I had just come home from a long day at the office, the kind of day that makes your brain feel like static on an old television. I tossed my keys into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. The familiar clink a small comfort. I shrugged off my jacket and headed for the kitchen, intent on finding something for dinner that did not come from a microwavable box. That is when I saw him out of the corner of my eye, a tall man standing perfectly still in the doorway to the living room. My first thought was not fear, but confusion, a simple, stupid question mark in my mind. Who is that? He was impossibly thin and elongated, like a shadow stretched to its breaking point. He wore a dark suit that seemed to absorb the light from the hallway, making it difficult to see any details. His face was pale and smooth, devoid of any expression, and his eyes were just two dark, empty sockets. I froze, my hand still on the refrigerator door. My heart decided to kick into a frantic gallop inside my chest. This was not a dream. The cold feel of the fridge handle under my fingers was too real. The hum of the appliance too loud. I was about to scream, to run, to do something, anything, when I noticed the paper. It was a single, crisp sheet of white paper, sitting on the center of my kitchen island. It had not been there when I left that morning. My eyes darted from the tall man back to the paper. He had not moved a muscle. He was just standing there, a silent statue of a man. My feet felt heavy as I forced myself to take a step toward the island. Then another, my gaze locked on the man in the doorway. He did not react. He did not even seem to breathe. When I reached the island, I looked down at the paper. The words were typed in a simple, clean font. The title read, "If you see a tall man in your house, follow these rules." My blood ran cold. This was not a random break-in. This was something else. Something worse. I began to read. The first rule was, do not make a sound, do not speak, do not scream, do not even whimper. Any noise you make will encourage him. I immediately clamped my mouth shut. I had not realized I had been breathing in ragged, noisy gasps. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow and quiet. The second rule was, do not look directly into his eyes for more than 3 seconds. He considers it a challenge. I quickly averted my gaze from his face, focusing instead on his tie, a dark slash against his white shirt. The third rule, you must go about your normal evening routine. You must act as if he is not there. Failure to maintain your routine will be seen as an invitation. An invitation for what? The paper did not say. I looked back at the list, my hands trembling so badly I had to press them flat against the cool granite of the countertop. Rule 4, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., you must be in your bed with the lights off. If you are not in your bed, he will find you, and you will not like where he takes you. Rule 5, if you hear whispering from another room, you must immediately start singing a song out loud. Any song. It disrupts his frequency. Rule 6, never look at his hands. Rule 7, if you see a second tall man, you have already broken a rule. There is no help for you. The list went on. A dozen more bizarre and terrifying instructions. Do not offer him food or drink. Do not try to take his picture. If he moves an object in your house, you must not move it back. I felt a wave of dizziness. This could not be happening. I looked up at the tall man. He was still there, still motionless, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that every word on that paper was true. So I began. I turned away from him, my body screaming in protest at showing my back to that thing. I opened the refrigerator and took out the leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. I put it on a plate and put it in the microwave. The beeping of the keypad as I set the timer sounded like a bomb countdown in the silent kitchen. I could feel his empty gaze on the back of my neck, a cold spot that seemed to seep through my skin. When the microwave dinged, I flinched so hard I nearly dropped the plate. I took my food to the small dining table. Sitting with my back to the living room doorway, I could not see him, but I knew he was there. I ate the pasta. It tasted like cardboard. Every chew was a conscious effort. I could not swallow properly. My throat was too tight with fear. After I forced down the last bite, I took my plate to the sink and washed it. The mundane task felt surreal, like I was an actor in a play about domestic life, all while a monster watched from the wings. I walked past the living room doorway to go to the bathroom. I kept my eyes forward, but in my peripheral vision, I saw that he had not moved. I brushed my teeth, the minty taste a stark contrast to the metallic fear in my mouth. I looked at my own face in the mirror. I looked pale, my eyes wide with a panic I could not express. I wanted to cry, to break down. But rule number 1 echoed in my head. Do not make a sound. I splashed water on my face and went back into the hall. As I passed the living room again, I saw something that made my heart stutter. He was no longer in the doorway. He was now standing in the center of the living room, facing the couch. He had moved, completely silently, without me seeing or hearing a thing. I quickened my pace to my bedroom, my sanctuary that no longer felt safe. I closed the door, but I did not lock it. Rule 8 stated, never lock any door between you and him. He views it as a game of hide and seek, and he always wins. I changed into my pajamas, my hands shaking so much I could barely button the shirt. I climbed into bed. It was only 8:30, but the rules said I had to be in bed by 10. I figured being early could not hurt. I lay there in the dim light of my bedside lamp, staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house, every rustle of the wind outside, sounded like his footsteps. I could not stop thinking about him. Just standing there in my living room, what did he want? Why was he here? Was he even a he? The rules called him a man. But everything about him felt wrong, alien. The hour dragged on, each minute an eternity. At 9:45, I reached over and turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. The digital clock on my dresser cast a faint red glow. 9:46, 9:47, I lay perfectly still, listening. The house was silent, too silent. It was the kind of silence that feels heavy, oppressive, like the calm before a storm. Then I heard it, a soft, shuffling sound in the hall. It was not a footstep, more like the sound of fabric brushing against the wall. He was moving. My breath hitched in my throat, and I prayed he had not heard it. The shuffling stopped right outside my bedroom door. I could see a sliver of light from the hallway under the door, and now that sliver was blotted out by a shadow. He was standing there, just on the other side of the thin wooden door. I squeezed my eyes shut, as if that would protect me. I do not know how long I lay there, frozen, waiting for the door to open, but it never did. Eventually, the shadow moved away, and the sliver of light returned. I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion, because the next thing I knew, sunlight was streaming through my window. I sat up slowly, every muscle tense. I listened. The house was quiet, the normal morning quiet. I got out of bed and crept to the door. I opened it a crack and peered out. The hallway was empty. I stepped out, my heart pounding. I checked the living room. It was empty too. A surge of relief washed over me, so powerful my knees felt weak. Had it been a dream? A hallucination? But then I saw it, on the coffee table. The remote control for my television was now standing on its end, balanced perfectly on its narrow edge. I had not left it like that. Rule 6 flashed in my mind. If he moves an object in your house, you must not move it back. I left the remote exactly as it was. I went to the kitchen. The paper of rules was still on the island, a stark reminder that it had all been real. The tall man was gone, but the rules remained, and I had a horrible feeling he would be back. That was the beginning of my new life, a life governed by a set of instructions I did not understand. The tall man did not appear every night. Sometimes 2 or 3 days would pass, and I would start to hope that he was gone for good. But then I would come home and find a book turned upside down on the shelf, or a single kitchen chair pulled out from the table, and I would know he had been there, and that he would return. I learned to live with the rules. I became an expert at controlling my reactions. I never screamed when I turned a corner and found him standing there. I never looked at his hands, though the urge to do so was sometimes overwhelming. I kept to my routine with robotic precision, eating my dinner, watching television, all while pretending the 7-foot-tall silent entity in the corner of the room was just a piece of furniture. The worst was the whispering. It happened for the first time about a month in. I was reading on the couch when I heard it. A low, sibilant sound coming from the kitchen. It was not in any language I recognized. It was just sounds. But they were layered, complex, and they seemed to crawl inside my head. My skin prickled, and for a moment I was paralyzed. Then I remembered Rule 5. I opened my mouth and began to sing the first song that came to mind. It was the national anthem. My voice was shaky and off-key, but I sang it loud. The whispering stopped immediately, cut off as if a switch had been flipped. The sudden silence was almost as frightening as the noise had been. I looked toward the kitchen and saw the tall man standing in the doorway. His head was tilted slightly, as if he were curious. I quickly looked away, back at my book, my heart hammering against my ribs. I kept singing until I finished the entire song. He remained there for another minute, then simply turned and walked away. I did not see where he went. I just felt his presence leave the room. That incident left me deeply shaken. The rules were not just arbitrary. They were a form of protection, a shaky fence between me and something I could not comprehend. I started researching. I spent hours online looking for any mention of tall men in suits or strange household rules. I found nothing, just creepypastas and fictional stories that did not match what I was living through. I was alone in this, completely and utterly alone. I could not tell anyone. Rule 10 explicitly forbade it. Do not speak of him to anyone. If you do, he will take them instead. I could not risk that, not for my friends, not for my family. The isolation was its own kind of torture. I would go to work and smile and make small talk, all the while wanting to grab my coworkers by the shoulders and scream. There is a monster in my house, and I have to sing show tunes to keep it from whispering at me. But I stayed silent. Months turned into a year. The constant state of vigilance was wearing me down. I had lost weight. I had dark circles permanently under my eyes. I jumped at the slightest noise. I was a ghost of my former self, living in a haunted house where I was the prisoner. One night, I broke. It was a stupid reason. Really, I had a bad day at work. My car would not start, and it was raining. I came home soaked and miserable. And there he was, standing in the hallway, blocking my path to the kitchen. Something inside me snapped. All the fear, the frustration, the anger at this invasion of my life, it boiled over. I looked directly at him. Into those dark, empty eye sockets, I stared, challenging him, breaking Rule 2. I wanted him to do something, to end this unbearable tension. For a long moment, nothing happened. He just stood there, and I held his gaze. Then, a slow, horrible smile spread across his featureless face. It was not a human smile. It was a stretching of the skin, a grotesque crack in the pale mask. I felt a cold dread wash over me. What had I done? I broke the gaze and hurried past him. My bravado gone, replaced by a fresh, more potent fear. That night, I went to bed as usual, but I could not sleep. The image of that smile was burned into my mind, a stark, unnatural gash in that pale canvas of a face that replayed behind my eyelids every time I closed them. The silence in the house was absolute, a heavy blanket smothering any sense of peace. Each tick of the clock on my nightstand was a hammer blow against my nerves, counting down to something I could not name. I lay there for hours, trapped in that state between exhaustion and sheer terror, my body aching for rest, but my mind racing in frantic, terrified circles. And then it came. Not the whispering I had grown almost accustomed to, but a new sound, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like a long, polished fingernail tapping insistently on the glass of my window. It was a delicate sound, almost polite, but it carried a weight of wrongness that made my stomach clench into a cold, hard knot. I lay still, my body rigid, every muscle locked tight. I prayed it was a tree branch, a bird, anything but what I knew in my gut it truly was. The tapping continued, persistent. It did not speed up or slow down. It was a metronome of menace, each tap a precise, measured violation of the night's quiet. I knew I should not look. Every instinct screamed at me to bury my head under the pillow and wait for morning. But the urge, a terrible, compelling curiosity mixed with a need to confirm my doom, was too strong. It was a physical pull. an invisible string attached to my skull. Turning my head against my will, I moved slowly, the sheets rustling like thunder in the silence. I turned my head just enough on the pillow to see the window across the room. The curtains were drawn, but there was a small gap between them, a sliver of darkness from the outside world, and in that gap, I saw a face. It was another tall man. His features were similar to the first ones, the same unnatural paleness, the same elongated structure, but they were sharper, more defined in a way that was somehow even more frightening. Where the first was a blank slate, this one had a cruel, angular quality to its cheeks and jaw, and its eyes, they were not empty sockets, they held a faint, malevolent glow, like the embers of a dying fire, casting a sickly, dim light on its own sharp features. Rule 7 screamed in my head, the words flashing behind my eyes as if written in lightning. If you see a second tall man, you have already broken a rule. There is no help for you. The finality of that statement crashed down on me. I had broken a rule. I had looked directly into the first one's eyes. I had challenged him. And this was the consequence. The arrival of the second one meant the game was over. The fragile protection of the rules had shattered, and I was done for. I was utterly and completely doomed. I squeezed my eyes shut, a pathetic attempt to block out the reality of what was outside my window. I was a child hiding from a monster, knowing full well the monster could see me. The tapping stopped. The sudden silence was somehow louder and more terrifying than the sound itself. It meant something was about to happen. And then I heard a new sound, the soft, unmistakable click of my bedroom door opening, the handle turning without a creak, the door swinging inward on silent hinges. I did not need to look. I could feel their presence. A double weight of wrongness pressing in on the room from both the window and the doorway. The air grew cold, a deep, penetrating cold that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the cold of a deep grave, of a void between stars. I could see my own breath misting in the faint light from the digital clock. Little puffs of panic made visible. I could feel them standing on either side of my bed, two pillars of silent, freezing darkness looking down at me. I was trembling uncontrollably, my teeth chattering despite my jaw being clenched shut. I thought they would take me, right then, to that place the rules had warned me about, the place you would not like. I imagined some endless, lightless space, or a cacophony of whispers that never ceased. I waited for a cold hand to grab my arm, for some unthinkable transportation to begin, but they did not touch me. They just stood there, the cold intensifying until I felt like my blood was turning to slush in my veins. Then, one of them, the first one, my tall man, leaned down close to my ear. I could feel the intense cold radiating from him, a wave of frost that made the side of my face go numb. And he spoke. His voice was like dry leaves skittering across pavement, a rustling, ancient sound that had no business forming a human word. It was the first and only time I ever heard him make a sound. And he said one word, one single, possessive word, mine. The sound of it echoed in my head, not in my ears, but deep inside my mind. It was not a question, it was a statement, a branding. Then, they were gone. The crushing pressure in the room vanished. The unbearable cold lifted so suddenly it felt like a shock. The room felt empty again. Just a normal room in a normal house. But I was not normal. I lay there until morning, paralyzed, too terrified to move a single muscle. I stared at the ceiling until the darkness outside my window turned to gray, then to the pale gold of dawn. When the sun was properly up, casting weak light through the curtains, I forced myself to get up, my body stiff and aching as if I had run a marathon. I moved through the house like a ghost, checking every room, every closet. The house was empty, truly empty, for the first time in over a year. The feeling of being watched was gone. The oppressive presence that had saturated the very walls had vanished. The tall man never returned after that night. Neither did the sharp-faced one with the glowing eyes. I was finally free, but I was not the same. I was a hollowed-out shell. The person I had been was gone, erased by a year of fear and finalized by that single rustling word. I moved out of that house a week later. I could not stay there anymore. Every shadow felt like it was his shadow. Every cold draft his breath. I now live in a small apartment on the top floor of a building with a doorman. I have multiple locks on my door. I keep the windows locked tight. I still follow the rules, not all of them, but the important ones. I never look directly at anyone for too long. A habit that makes people think I am shifty or uninterested. I keep to a strict routine. The comfort of predictability, the only shield I have left, and I never, ever make a sound when I am afraid. I freeze and hold my breath, becoming as silent and still as possible. Sometimes, late at night, I think I hear a faint tapping on my window. A delicate, rhythmic sound against the glass, but when I look, my heart in my throat, there is never anything there. Just the city lights twinkling in the distance. I am safe, I think. I tell myself that every day, I have a doorman. I have locks, I have a routine. But I know the truth. A truth that lives in the marrow of my bones. I am not really free. The rules were not to keep him out. They were to mark me as a careful possession, and I had broken one. I had been claimed. I am just his, and he knows where to find me.